Hey guys, I want to welcome you to the weekly Wednesday for the Financial Freedom newsletter, where every week, every Wednesday, we delve into something inspirational, motivational, something excerpt taken from the Financial Freedom weekly newsletter. Wherever you are, if you're listening on Spotify, on iTunes, Google, be sure to click the like, subscribe, share, comment. And without ado, let's get into the show. Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom podcast. And I'm excited to bring to you today's guest, Rebecca Weaver. She's founder and CEO of HR Uprise. We're going to talk about how the workplace has changed after COVID, and talk about post-traumatic growth, resiliency, the workplace, company culture. Can be a fascinating discussion, and I'm happy to welcome Rebecca to the show. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, we had connected through Podmatch, and you actually dubbed yourself as the anti-HR professional, which I'm gonna ask you about later. So I know you have a story to share, so share it, and we'll get started.
Sure. So, where to get started? I have worked in HR for about 23 years now, and I consider it to be this profession that I've kind of loved to hate, to be honest. It is, I've always loved it when people would say to me, "Oh, you don't really seem like HR." And, part of the reason, as I think back about it, part of the reason for that is that HR doesn't have a great reputation. It hasn't for a long time. When I look at it, when I've really interrogated why that is the case, I mean, the sad reality is there's good reason for that in a lot of cases. And so I've always wanted to be the kind of anti-HR person. I sort of fell into the profession itself, but then ultimately ended up creating a company. I never even intended to create the company. I started it as an Instagram account. In the wake of Me Too, I'm looking around at all these conversations that are happening, people speaking up for the first time. And the phrase I keep hearing over and over again was about how people felt burned by HR. And, I'm looking at these HR circles that I'm in, these professional circles, and I thought, why are we not talking about this? Why don't we have more conversation about it? So I launched HR Uprise as an Instagram account. I thought interestingly, I was actually the head of HR for an advertising agency at the time. And so some of the creatives came together with me and I said, look, I have a lot to say. What's a good place to do this? How do I do it? And so they came up with the logo. They helped me come up with Instagram as the place to get started. And that's really where it began. So I never intended to start a company on this, but the Instagram account exploded. And it was really interesting because I was posting these things that were, very critical of HR. And people really started responding to that. So that's really the origin of my company and where we got started.
Interesting. So I have a question. Is HR the problem, or is it the core? Like, I always thought that it was the C-suite and the administrators, all the bureaucracy. But it's interesting that people point the finger to HR.
It's a fantastic question. The short answer to your question is it's all of the above. Part of the problem with HR and part of the reason that HR gets really blamed is kind of a little bit of shooting the messenger. HR is the face of the organization, but so now we're up on my soapbox. Here's my soapbox about the problem. The problem is you ask most people, what is HR's role within an organization? And they would say, oh, it's the company culture. We're here to build this to be a great place to work. And that is all very true and very well intentioned. The challenge is, if there's ever a conflict between what is best for the company and what is best for the organization wins out every time. And it is HR's primary function above everything else to protect the organization. And so it's that conflict that really comes into play. And again, where I hear that phrase so often from people, I was burned by HR, it's because they came to HR looking for that advocate, that, company culture expert. And what they get is a representative of the organization.
Yeah, interesting. I'm just curious. And then you had, so especially with COVID and with remote work and silent quitting, outright quitting, how has the workplace changed in the past few years, and what do companies need to know to build the company culture now?
So much. So we've all come through this. So I am not a medical expert, and especially for your audience, I will be very, very clear to say that. But I think that I think it's fair to say that we have collectively been through an incredibly traumatic experience over the last couple of years through this pandemic. And it really even started before that. So you think about the changes that started to occur with Me Too. And then we went through this pandemic. We went through this global reckoning when it comes to racial issues within the workplace. I mean, all of these things have changed overnight. Entire industries dissolved completely overnight. We had people moving to a completely remote workplace. It's just everything has changed so dramatically. And so for me, I learned about this concept of post-traumatic growth in my own experience. So I was diagnosed with breast cancer at the beginning of the pandemic. And my husband, who is a physician, is an emergency physician, happens to work at the hospital where they treated the first COVID patient here in the US. So it hit us here very, very early. And as I went through chemotherapy, we had our two very young daughters home because, of course, the schools were shutting down at that time. I went through chemo and my husband had to move out because he continued to serve and continued to do his job. But he was seeing patients every day, of course, with this virus that we knew very little about at that point in time. So that whole experience for me, obviously, was incredibly personal. And in the midst of all of that, I was introduced to this concept of post-traumatic growth. But the idea being that it is even through traumatic experiences, many, many people have the opportunity and actually are able to emerge from that experience having grown. And so, I really dug into it. And again, being the corporate workplace culture nerd that I am now working on a book exploring that concept of post-traumatic growth and how do we apply that to the workplace? How can we use this concept? There are 5 pillars to it. How do we use renewed appreciation of life, relationships with others, all these different ways in which we can grow from a traumatic experience and implement that to really become the leaders that we need to be for now and into the future.
I think, the word that comes to mind when you're describing this is resilient, emotional, especially emotional, for the audience, financial as well. And so what are companies getting wrong about the workplace now? This is fascinating.
Yeah. Well, you can see the headlines even still of all of these organizations that are forcing a return to work. We're seeing it over and over again. So I'd say that's number one thing that companies are getting wrong. I think if we really have to boil it down, it's really about organization feeling like we are going back to what it used to be. And my argument is that doesn't exist anymore. That reality is no longer possible. It does not exist anymore. And I think the smart companies today are really thinking about how are we able to hold on to some of the benefits of the workplace, because there were some over the changes over the past couple of years. And how do we then ensure that we're holding on to those and adapting for the future? So it's really about adapting.
Yeah, I love that. I'm just curious. There's 2 scenarios in my mind. One is, or actually 3 scenarios. One is where you have really great companies, Apple's, these high value companies, and they incorporate what you're talking about. And then I see kind of in the middle where this people talking, but it's like politics and nothing gets done. It's just, talking. And then another one is where majority of people, they won't go to a job. They'll create their own jobs, and they'll start their own companies, and they'll have their own income streams. So I'm just curious how you see it playing out.
Apologies for that. That's the lingering effects of chemo. So thank you for that. Thank you, cancer. Absolutely. So we talk about this great resignation. Honestly, what I see it as is as great reevaluation, right? We have had the opportunity, and through this largely traumatic experience, we saw millions of people die in a couple of years. And people are reevaluating, how they spend their time. And for me personally, having been through cancer treatment at a very young age, relatively speaking, for me, the way that I look at it is it's this aggressive daily reminder. Truly, tomorrow is not promised. And excuse me, I was fine. I felt fine until they tried to cure me. It's this very aggressive reminder that tomorrow is not promised.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that I look at it is, okay, so now what? How is your work going to have meaning? How are you spending your time? Does it reflect the values that you have? It's this, and I think everyone has gone through some degree of that question. And so that has led to massive numbers of people who are starting businesses, definitely leaving jobs that they did not feel fulfilled in, that they did not feel respected in any number of ways. And people are really reevaluating. That was, I think, one of, I don't know if benefit is the right word, but certainly one of the silver linings coming out of, such a highly traumatic event as a pandemic. We have the opportunity to really reevaluate what we're doing. And so I think that's really what we're seeing now is people asking themselves that question. And it's that, okay, so now what?
Yeah, I love that. What you described so beautifully, these ideas of and I love this basic concept of reevaluating. And, eventually, it's like before is like you just had a job, and you went to a job, and then now they had like remote work, and then this kind of, you see this people creating and living based on their values and what they want. This very fascinating concept. And how does HR Uprise fit into all this? I know it's a advocacy organizations. Tell the audience about that, and how people can contact you and find you, etc.
Yeah, for sure. Really, in this great reevaluation, and, with the very beginning of this organization as an Instagram account, really been thinking about how can we better support employees in the workplace. And so HR Uprise as an organization, we do that in a number of ways. We are especially interested in helping small organizations. You would see the vast majority, I think the last statistic I saw was 90% of employees in the United States actually work for a small business. It is such an underserved market when it comes to having the right support, when it comes to, again, not just viewing compliance. Of course, that's the stuff that will get you into legal trouble. And that is stuff you need to pay attention to. But too many organizations really view that as their obligation. And once that's satisfied, we're done, we move on. And really at HR Uprise, we're really all about, we can truly build our culture around the employee, make it that growth organization. And it does not require the resources of a huge enterprise organization. So we offer fractional HR. We also offer programs for ultra small organizations, so maybe 1 or 2 employees that help support them as well. So those are probably the best ways that we can help support, and especially if people are interested in finding out more, they can go to our website, which is HR, and that's probably the best place to find information. That's where you can reach out. You can connect with me there or on LinkedIn as well. And then we are still on Instagram, where it all started. So you can find us at HR Uprise there as well.
I love that. And for the audience out there, let's thank Rebecca for this very inspiring story, emerging stronger, talking about company culture, values, future of the workplace, and overall emotional health, well-being. All of Rebecca's resources will be in the links and show notes. And with that, thanks so much for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you. It was a great conversation.
I hope you really enjoyed that wonderful, inspirational, motivational piece. Again, wherever you are listening, if you liked it, be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe. We're on everywhere: Spotify, iTunes, Google, Amazon, Audible. And without much ado, be sure to thank this show's sponsors, and we'll see you next week.